The death of the Maverick. Where did they go? The players who made you gasp, who played like the ball was glued to their feet. The Mavericks, are they gone for good? The Okochas of this world with tricks for days, yet still so effective on the pitch. The Ronaldinhos, playing with a smile on his face. Improvisation for days. Luis Figo, the dribbling. Eden Hazard, the beauty, the skills. We're now left with the likes of Cole Palmer, but it is a dying breed in footballing terms. Today, I'm going to delve into the death of the Maverick footballer and why footballers become such a structured, rigid, and for some, a boring process to watch, and also potentially for the players to play in as well. We're going to go into it now. So I changed my shirt just to keep you on your toes so that you don't get bored, which is technically what this video is all about. I want to ask you lot a question that I'd love to hear your answers to. Personal question, but who was the person or the player that made you fall in love with football? For many people, the answer would be someone like a Ronaldinho, who you could watch a highlight reel of and be like, wow, what he can do with a ball at his feet is quite incredible. If you compare it to the sport of tennis, which is a sport that I love to play myself, Roger Federer just seemed to grace the court, and nowadays in the sport of tennis, it's very much about how hard is your serve, can you get your serve in? If that's the case, you're probably going to win the point. In footballing terms, we seem to have lost the amount, and I'm talking about quantity, of players that can absolutely get you off your seat. Okocha was a man that I was fortunate enough to interview in Paris a few years ago. He just had this glint in his eye that whenever he saw the football, it wasn't always about where is my teammate, where shall I pass it, where should I be, and it was about making something happen. And it is these players in the wholeness that was the way that they played the game that got so many people hooked on football in the late 90s, the early 2000s, where we had an abundance of these kind of players in the game. They brought an unpredictability. If you remember Ronaldinho, the famous game at Stamford Bridge, which Chelsea won 4-2, raced into a 3-0 lead with the likes of Damien Duff on the score sheet, but then Ronaldinho had the moment of magic that left the whole crowd at Stamford Bridge looking in awe as the Brazilian just danced with his feet and put the ball past, at the time, probably the best keeper in the world, Petr Cech. And nowadays, we don't necessarily see that so much. We are in the system era of football. And if you're a Manchester City fan, you're probably absolutely loving this because as a result of the Pep Guardiolas of this world, Man City fans have experienced a flood of trophies. And to be quite honest, Guardiola and the amount of winning that he has installed at Manchester City, it's made that possession style of football the desired way to play. Because when you look at Man City and the success that they've had, it's been predominantly based around the team over that of the individual. Manchester City have got an oiled engine where everybody knows exactly where to be at whatever given time. They have players like Riyad Mahrez that could absolutely get you off your seat, and then you've got the players like Kevin De Bruyne that can score thunderbolts from outside the box. But nowadays, we are seeing, in my opinion, the stifling of these kind of creative players in the name of setting these systems up, of adopting these practices, and it makes football, to me, seem a little bit boring. And it's interesting after yesterday where you got 2 0-0 draws, Brentford 0, Chelsea 0, and then arguably one of the worst Manchester derbies that you've ever seen. And let's focus on the Manchester derby for a second, because obviously Guardiola this season, Man City have struggled and they're about to enter a new era. Probably their best player ever, De Bruyne, is leaving the club at the end of this season. And with Manchester United, you've got Ruben Amorim, another system manager who's come into Manchester United, looked at the shit show and been like, well, doesn't matter about that. I play with 3 at the back. This is what I'm going to do. We're going to keep going with it. And yesterday, I think if you're inside that stadium at Old Trafford and you're excited about a Manchester derby, because it's system versus system, neither team playing very well, it just took the energy out of the occasion. It took the sting out of the game. And I think because of the way that the managers are setting these two teams up in particular, I don't think there was ever the impetus from any of those creative-minded players on the pitch to take a risk, take a gamble, and make something happen. Now, I don't want this video to just seem like a dig at Pep Guardiola because he's incredibly successful, and of course, there are also disciples of his that are currently trying to implement a similar style and get success at other football clubs that we know about in the Premier League. But at the same time, I want to know why and if we have to settle for these kind of players being a luxury in the modern game. If you're a young footballer, maybe watching this video, growing up right now, go out there at the weekend, and if you're told, pass backwards, keep possession, do this, do that, just have a little think. What would Ronaldinho do? And maybe try something a little bit different. We've got to keep this kind of childlike feeling in the game. It is what gets people paying the money. And when we're talking about money, there's so much money to be won in the sport of football now. So I can understand why a long-term system might be what is pushed further, particularly at grassroots level, because you want the players that are coming up through the youth years at football clubs to be able to walk straight into the first team in the men's game and actually be able to implement the strategies and that of the manager. So I understand why, but I think this is purely in a modern world where entertainment is everything. You got Instagram, you got this YouTube video, you got TikTok. We've got our attention spans being taken in every single direction. Maybe this is just the luxury of the fan to even be in a position to be able to criticize the entertainment levels behind football, and maybe it still is just all about winning. But for me personally, I do find this risk-averse football with less creative expression, fewer solo runs from players that can beat a man and take players on, and just your everyday dribblers of the world that we've been growing up watching for all these years. The lack of this now absolutely does take a large portion of the fun away from football. We have to also ask the question, is it about the motivation of the players? Because it isn't just the Mavericks that we're seeing less of, it's also the John Terrys and Carlos Pujols of this world that would dive in front of a ball at all costs to protect their team. You're not seeing as much of this anymore. Are footballers getting paid too much money to even think about having fun out there on the pitch? Is it all just a job now? We've also got to focus a bit on the data side of football and how there is now so many deeper forms of analysis. And obviously you got blokes like me giving their two penneth on social media and YouTube and all that. So there's always going to be criticism and there's always going to be feedback. And I guess the big question is, does it matter that us fans are quite bored by the quality of football and lack of excitement that we're witnessing game after game in the leagues? And look, it doesn't mean every game is boring. I'm certainly not bored of football, but I think if we're homing in on what football is missing, I think it is missing that creative expression. It is missing those mercurial talents that would just do something out of nowhere. I mean, even Garnacho, his overhead kick, that is a moment of absolute magic, but look at the way that he's been stifled at Manchester United. The growth of him as a footballer is at a point now where if you see that overhead kick and that's the only thing you've ever seen from Garnacho, you'd say, yeah, he's a £50 million player in the modern game, but I certainly don't want to see him at Chelsea. I don't want to see my club spending 50 million on Garnacho. And again, that's just one example. But I do think we're seeing a further development here of the data-driven side of football, where this is leading to these tactical tweaks, changes, and safety blankets that managers are trying to coat their players in right now. I guess the question I've got for you guys in the comments of this video, do you want safer football, or do we crave that chaos that we grew up watching? Particularly myself, I'm a 30-year-old man. I've watched some absolute brilliant footballers in my time. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments down below. I guess it depends which club you support. It depends if your club are playing this very systemic, boring football, and if you've won a load of trophies, you probably don't care. But it is a good, interesting question. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments down below. Subscribe to more GBFC if you are new, and I'll catch you guys next time.